Let me start this recording. All right. We're going to talk about document retention policies and mitigating risk that's associated with businesses either having or not having the proper documentation. And we'll do a first presentation in regards to the technology side of it. And then Francine Love, who is a business lawyer, is here to also discuss the legal ramifications of having or not having proper documentation policies and procedures within your organization. All right. So let me get my screen shared here. All right. So the first thing is, what is a retention policy? A retention policy, also called a schedule, is a key part of the life cycle of a record. It describes how long businesses need to keep a piece of information record, where it is stored, and how it's disposed of when it's time to dispose of it. So, I mean, that's ambiguous, but what does it really mean? So, we collect documentation, and based on federal, state, and if you're in the healthcare industry, you got HIPAA standards, but there are many standards that say a business is required to hold on to documentation for a specific period of time. After that period of time, you are, by law, able to destroy and get rid of those documents. And the difference is that having that document longer than you need could expose your organization and you to risk, legal risk, monetary risk. Not having those documents also does the same. And later on in the presentation, Francine Love is going to talk a little bit about those kind of risks and what they mean in terms of our businesses. So what is a retention policy? So here is an example of a well-defined retention policy by a local organization that everybody should know. Now, in this retention policy, what they do is they clearly define the scope, what the retention policy should be. They also go through different procedures and guidelines. So, but they outline everything that's needed to know about how the company should act in regards to its documentation. So, a normal business should have something like this that defines how their records are stored. They break it down by different categories of records, all right, for the whole business. And then what they did, and I'm not saying everybody needs to do this, but this, I'm just showing a great, I mean, this is like the Cadillac of retention policies. As you see, they divided it up based on the department or the business process. They define the different document types. And I'm going to talk a little bit about this, defining those document types. Then what is the retention policy? And in this particular example, they even outlined what law it applies to, whether it's a federal law or down here, we can see this is a state law. So in your industry and these regulations, as far as how long you keep it, when you can destroy it, will vary from state to state. All right. So how do we apply this to our business? And what are the tools that we use? So if I'm looking at, let's go over here. I have my documents all stored on my drives. So here is a external drive. We see bunches and all these documents and things of that nature. I have Google Drive, cloud drives, things of that nature. So I'm storing my documents here. All right. I could also put them in boxes. But how do I apply that retention policy to these documents here in Windows, in Explorer? There is no way. So I have to rely on me and my people to come into these folders on a day-to-day basis, hunt for these documents and find them in order to meet those retention policy guidelines. Another example, I take a folder and I scan it. So here's an example of a scanned file. This is like an employee file. And if I'm looking over here, I see various documents. So from here we have the acknowledgement page, but this is a different document. So remember in that sheet, each one of these is a different document type. So even though I scanned all of this paperwork, it's a 57-page file, PDF file. I have it saved on my hard drive. How do I apply a retention policy to these 4 pages, a different retention to this page, and so on and so on? I can't. So I would have to know that all these documents are sitting in this one file. And when it comes time to get rid of those documents, I have to open up this file, find that particular page, and then delete it. So what are the tools that we can use? Again, when we talk about document storage, this is storage. I just have my documents sitting somewhere. I can't do those kind of things. I can't apply a retention policy. So an enterprise document management system is the one place, and here's another place. This is Salesforce. I have documents sitting in Salesforce. Does Salesforce have a retention policy for the documents that I put into it? Does QuickBooks, does any software application you're using allow you to put a retention policy onto those documents? If I have a retention policy for the paper files that are in my file cabinet, but I forget to apply that in Salesforce or on my hard drive or in my cloud drive, Google Drive, OneDrive, or even a network drive, then I'm still in an exposure. Because if that document resides in Salesforce, they still have the ability, and it has the ability to expose me to risk because I haven't gotten rid of it. So one of the applications we use, and there are many document management and enterprise, and I'm going to call it enterprise, but don't let the word enterprise scare you. This particular document management system, which gives you the ability to do almost anything you want, sort your documents out, do workflow processes, approval processes. As you see here, I can take my business rules and my business workflow and apply it in here. So I got an invoice that needs to be approved. These documents need to have work done on them. Actually, these are driver's licenses that I'm tracking in the system. They're about to expire in the next 90 days. So now it's making me aware of that. But what a document management system does, remember that, and if anybody wasn't here, remember this list? This is my retention policy list. So these are my document types. These are the retention policies for those document types in this particular area. So if I come over here, I can define those same document types. Oh, let me get logged in again. Sorry about that. In this system. So here are the different document types for my clients. Here are the different document types, as you saw from that list, for my HR. And I can do the same thing for accounting, facilities. It doesn't matter. Any aspect of your company, I can now define every piece of paper that I need in my organization. And when we talk about retention policies, I can set them up automatically. So if I come in to my client service record, there it is. The retention policy is already set. So every document that comes into this system that's automatically captured, whether I scan it, I'm pulling it in automatically from your emails or wherever it comes from. The second it's captured, I have my retention policy standards applied to every single document in that system. And this becomes a central repository. So when we talk about how do I mitigate risk? And I'm looking at this, and every business today, whether they're doing this in their office, you have documents that sit on network drives and places like that. But we're also working remotely. We have people working remotely. So now I also have to worry about, while you're accessing my corporate network working from home, how many people get a document by email and save it to the PC folder of their documents? All right, it's one thing to be on the company network, but I'm at home using my personal computer or my laptop. And I do it. I get an email, somebody sends me an attachment. First thing I do, I save it. I don't want to hunt for it. I know where it is. I put it in my documents folder, or I put it in a folder. I don't have to worry about going and searching the email. But now, because that's on my personal computer, not the network computer, do the retention policies that the corporation have apply to that. So there's a lot of areas where we can mitigate risk and exposure by having a centralized document management system. And remember, I said enterprise, all right? And I don't want to scare anybody with that word enterprise. This particular application, which does a lot, gives you 250 gigabytes of storage. And for documentation, that's a lot of storage. And it starts at $35 a month per user. So even if I had two users, let's say I have a main user who's the administrator, has access to every single document I have. But then I have another user, which I give to my other employees. They can do their things, but they don't see my corporate records. I can isolate my personal stuff and my critical business stuff from them, and they just see the documentation that works. So for $70 a month, my whole company is totally secure, retention policies, destruction policies. I can have reports run showing me what documents are coming up for destruction. And again, if I wanted to incorporate any kind of workflow processes, whether I'm tracking documentation, tracking the life cycle of it, the destruction, or moving it through the system, and also integrating it with other applications like QuickBooks and things of that nature, this system does it. So this is the difference between having a good retention policy. And again, the staple is this particular one. It is very detailed. Again, it goes through the whole process, defines everything, then outlines every single piece of paper that is used by the organization, puts it in a place, and gives it a definite time as far as its retention. So these are the things that we need to consider as small businesses, because we don't have the resources to track it all. So how do we do it to protect ourselves? So that's the 50,000 foot view of using technology. So now what I want to do is I want to turn it over to Francine Love. Again, these are quick tech minutes, just giving you an idea of it. But now I want Francine to talk about the legal ramifications of either having the documents or not having it, and what's your exposure. So Francine, you're up.
Great. Well, thank you, Fred. And I can tell you that having a solution like that is really important. When I was the chief privacy officer and head of compliance for a multi-billion-dollar company for a while, we always struggled with, how do I find my records and what can I do? So a system like that is very important. I have a somewhat similar presentation at the beginning, just about how do you define what is a record and what, excuse me, what should I be saving? Fred, are you able to let me share my screen? Can I do that now?
Yes, you are. You should be able to, on the bottom of the control panel, just hit the green button that says share.
Excellent. I'm going to pull it up. Let's see how I do. This is always the most exciting part of any presentation is, can I actually, why is it not letting me do this quickly? Huh.
Did you email it to me?
No, but I'm about to. Okay. I apologize, everyone.
It's all right. Slight little pause. Again, at the end of this, feel free to ask any kind of questions you will have in regards to what the retention policy is, or how to use it, or what's the, any question. Doesn't matter. Just waiting for the email, and I'll share the screen.
It is coming right now, Fred. Thank you.
Okay.
It is away. Excellent. Okay. So let me start with just what an overview is. And this is what Fred was talking about. It allows you to determine what records, and we'll talk about what a record is, that you should be handling, managing, retaining, and destroying on a timely basis. And one of the things that really struck me when Fred was speaking was about document destruction. People don't think about it. They say, oh, I have this whole cabinet full of stuff. I'm covered in case anything ever comes up. And those of us here who've dealt with litigations and other bad situations know that sometimes it's best to not have an abundance of things readily producible to an adverse party. And so we want to think about when can we get rid of documents that may or may not be as helpful to us as we would like. There it is. So let's talk about on the first screen is just the overview, right? And in order to set up our next slide, Fred, there we go, to figure out an effective document retention policy, you need to first figure out why you're doing it, which is risk avoidance, steps you need to create, and then how do you implement this throughout your organization. Again, lots of us have great ideas. We do it, we love it, it's going to be wonderful, and we forget to tell our staff, we forget to convey this, and so we need to make sure that this is well known. So what's in a document retention policy? Really, there's no one size fits all, and this is part of what Fred was going to. Like that one from LIJ was amazing, right? That is a Cadillac. That is what we all do when we have multi-$100 million revenue coming in, a very complex and regulated industry, and we have thousands of employees over multiple geographic spaces. So yes, that's the document that they need. That's not necessarily the document that I need in my law firm or you need in your small business. So we can kind of boil that down to some of the essentials, but the main ideas are still there. And I have a sample policy that's a little bit more distilled for small businesses that I'm happy to share with people if they'd like. But you're going to look at the type of and size of your company, the type of information you're handling, and what the laws are. And really, your risk depends on what you bring in. And you need to think about what's the type of information that I would not want to either get out into the world accidentally or to have, or that I need to maintain carefully for tax, litigation, claim, or other purposes. And so you're going to think about the different types of information that you receive from vendors, from customers, from employees, and from other interactions. If we go to the next one, why have it? Again, it's not feasible to have to think about and keep every document forever. And so we want to set up time periods for when it's best to maintain them. And then also when you have a policy, it allows you to have the assurance you need that you're doing the right thing by disposing of a document or retaining it. Okay, first step to creating a document retention policy, and that's the next stage. You got to pick someone who's going to do it, right? You got to find someone who's going to write this policy. This is going to be the person who is responsible for implementing and enforcing the policy. In a small business, it's most likely you, the owner. But if you have more staff, then it's going to be a senior person who works with you and helps you understand what's going on. They need to have appropriate authority, though, to suspend the policy. And I'll talk about why you might do that later here in a moment, and how they can manage it. Then you're going to determine the types of documents that you handle. And we talked about a few. And then you have to think about what are the laws that govern each of those categories and for how long you have to maintain those records. Okay, so what are some examples of categories? And that listing that you saw from LIJ was great. But here are some others that are more boiled down for smaller businesses. Employment documents. This is probably, other than the tax and legal, those are the three that are so important for small businesses to maintain. If you have an employee, I always tell people the best day of your business is the day you hire your first employee. And it's also the worst day of your business because now you have lots of responsibility vis-a-vis your employees. And part of it is a proper handling of the documentation. As you know, when you onboard employees, you're going to be getting their I-9s. You have, as you saw in Fred's example, you have copies of passports or driver's license, you have social security numbers, you have bank account information for direct deposit, you may have credit history or background information that you ran when you were hiring them. And then once you have them, you hire them, you fire them, you promote them, you demote them, you have requests for leave, and people tell you personal things. I'm having to have surgery because of X, Y, or Z. Not that you asked for that, because you know as an employer you don't ask that question, but they just come and tell you things, and now you have a record of it. And so what do you do with those documents? And there are laws that govern each of those different types of information that you've gotten and how long you should keep it. Health records. If you are a healthcare provider, then you're certainly under a very tightly regulated industry that has specific time frames for when you have to keep patient records, invoices, procedures, reimbursements, payment schedules. But then just as a person, you have your own health records. And then in your company, to the extent that someone is potentially injured on the job or goes out on a medical leave, then how long do you need to keep those records? Payroll and financial and tax, right? The IRS and the Department of Taxation do not forget things. They don't look away. They really want their money and they want you to give it to them. And they want you to prove that you gave them the appropriate amount of money. And so you need to be sure that you maintain adequate records for why you took that deduction, the supporting documentation that you have to prove it, and also for the people that you paid. Did you pay them? And this goes to FLSA and other charges that people bring. Oh, I worked for you and you never paid me. Oh, well, here are my payroll records. And here I have that you showed you worked 20 hours this week, 25 hours that week, 40 hours this week. And here's the computation and this is the pay. And here's a confirmation from my payroll provider that it went into your direct deposit, or here's a copy of the check. So these are important things for you to have. Legal records. This is a wide range of categories. It's everything from the formational documents of your company, which surprisingly you need more often than you ever think you're going to need them. And they come up at random times. You're opening a new bank account. You're having to prove to someone that you are a legitimate entity and not just a sole proprietorship or some other reason. So you have your formational documents. You have the documents that help you understand your relationship with other partners, which comes up a lot in partnership disputes or questions about who can really run the business and how do they have the authority. And then it goes to other legal records of people who've made claims against you. The person who came into your shop and had a slip and fall, the person who claims that you didn't do the service properly, or it's even legal records of an investigation you did as to an employee where you suspected malfeasance or wrongdoing on their part and the steps that you took. So those are a broad range of legal records that you will want to maintain and keep in your records. And then environmental records. This is important, especially on Long Island, where some of our areas are protected, and you need to show that you've been in compliance with any of those type of ordinances in the conduct of your business. And then if you're in an industry where you're using chemicals or other things, that you are properly disposing of them and maintaining good environmental procedures. So those are just a few categories of documents, which can really send your mind spinning, especially if you're not someone who, I mean, you didn't go into business to maintain categories of documents. And I get that. This is not exciting and fun. It's lawyers like me who love this stuff because, you know, this makes sense to us and we get it. And it helps us navigate the world of business because we can understand relationships because of it. But a lot of people this isn't what you got into business for. You got into business because you had a great idea, you have a great product, and you want to sell it and get it out to the world. So you want to work with people like Fred, myself, and others who can help you figure out how we can capture these records, put them aside, and take care of them. Now, why is that important? If we go to the next slide, I don't know if Fred's there. Ah, thank you, Fred. The mysterious blank face. There are a lot of laws that can apply here, and I've listed a few. And, you know, lawyers, we like to do this just to scare people and to show people that there's a lot of reach by the government into how you do business. And again, you got into business because you have a great idea, you have a great product, you want to get this out to the world, but there are a lot of compliance issues that you need to consider. These are just a few. And in my practice, I work with a lot of healthcare providers. So we have HIPAA issues all the time. We have other regulations about standard of care and duty. We have issues with all of my employers have FLSA, Human Rights Act, state and federal tax, all of the ERISA, the OSHA, all of those things come into play. So just simply by playing in the space of having a business, you have all of these different laws coming and hitting on you. And so you want to think about that. And to the extent that it doesn't make sense or you don't understand it, you have great resources available to you who can help you kind of boil down the ocean and decide what's most important to keep. And if we go to the next one slide, here is just a sample of a grid that I would share with a client about employment records and things that you need to keep. And you can see the range is anywhere from 1 year to 18 years that the law mandates you must maintain certain records. And so really, and again, an employee record, if I was going to give just basic advice, is once you have an employee, you should consider that to be generally a permanent record, with the understanding that in general, many of the documents that you're creating for the employee, you're going to maintain at least 7 years. And then you have to keep it often after they've left the firm for a period of time, because they have what's called the statute of limitations. They have an ability of time post-termination to assert claims against you that you didn't pay them fairly, you didn't pay them appropriately, and you need to maintain it. So this is just a sample of a few things that you need to maintain. Now, what's an example of how I help clients? When I had an employer who recently, with the pandemic, had to lay off a number of employees. They laid off approximately 75 employees. They furloughed them in the beginning of March because they have a series of retail operations throughout the 5 boroughs. Then around May, when the first of the PPP loans and others were coming in and they were starting to begin to open up little pieces, they sent a letter out to about 25 employees offering to recall them to work. Well, one of those employees didn't react well to being potentially called back. They didn't want to lose their $600 a week pandemic check. And they were also ostensibly concerned about other members of their household, not themselves, having pre-existing conditions that would make them more susceptible to the coronavirus. So they wrote back to the email recalling them to work and copied all of these news organizations and basically called out my employer saying, you know, you're rushing into this and it's not safe and we can't come back. And oh my God. And then they were like, what do we do? So we worked on a whole pre-litigation strategy to make sure we maintained records for that employee very carefully, because we were worried that he might try to bring a claim. And then later we recalled more employees. So we wanted to show why we didn't include him in that and the decision making. And then we laid off more employees again when things went tight once again in New York City. And we showed, you know, this makes sense to why we didn't recall him. And we've taken all of those records and all of the emails and all of the notes about the decision-making process. And basically we've put them in a lockbox and they're being maintained at the company for a period of years in case litigation ever ensues, right? And that's just an example of why record keeping is important, because we want to be able to show, because who's going to remember, right? I don't remember things that happened a month ago, certainly not even at the beginning of the pandemic. My brain is pandemic brain at this point, which I'm sure a lot of people, there's so much has happened, so much change, so many crazy situations. You can't rely on your memory for your thought process for a particular decision or action. By reducing it to writing, putting it in a record, and then maintaining it properly, we have the ability, should this person come and assert, you didn't bring me back for a reason, I'm going to bring a lawsuit against you because you discriminated against me. Now we have it all ready to trot out. It'll refresh our recollection. We have the original documents safe and secure, and we're able to respond. That's just one simple example of how document retention can help you. I had it with another employer. One of the things I recommend to all of my small businesses is that they maintain good corporate records. And my firm has a service where, depending on the size of your firm, we'll either do it quarterly, semi-annually, or annually. We'll sit down with you and we have a questionnaire of 80 questions, things that you did in the course of the prior period. And then we will make minutes to record what happened so that you can save them and keep them. Now, that sounds like, well, that's stupid and paperwork. I had an employer who belonged to this service, and we've been doing it for a couple years. And after an employee was fired because he was sleeping on the job and not doing his performance, he came back and he said, you didn't give me bonuses, and you gave everyone else a Christmas bonus, and you didn't do that for me because I look different from other employees at the firm. Okay. So I pulled up the records for the last 3 years of Christmas bonuses, because we record that. We record the name of every employee and the amount that they were given. Not only had he received a Christmas bonus every single year, but he was the highest bonus that was paid each year. So I called his attorney and I said, thanks for filing this. Are you aware of this? And once I sent over copies of those minutes, it was over. The litigation, it went away because it showed that this guy didn't know what he was talking about, and we had the records to back it up. So what's a legal risk? A legal risk is not having records of decisions that you made and actions that you took, and being able to back them up when people come to make claims, whether they're proper or not. Then on the next one, I have some listing of if you're a healthcare provider. Like I said, I have a lot of healthcare providers. I have doctors, therapists, physical therapists, all sorts of counselors, psychologists. There's a lot of records. And Fred, God, this is a space that Fred works in all the time, and he could blow this out. If you're an agency, you have record retention of a minimum of 7.5 years, sometimes perpetually. If you're an agency, if you are a course sponsor, if you're providing training, and then under HIPAA, like there are a lot of regulations. So to the extent that you're playing in the healthcare industry or you're advising people, you should be aware that they have a very lengthy time that they have to maintain these. And again, this is, much of it goes to, for litigation purposes, right, in case someone makes a claim, but also for the financial records. Did you properly pay under claims that were submitted? The next type is tax records, and this applies to all companies, whether or not, irrespective of industry. How long should you maintain your tax records? Well, I'm of the pretty much forever, because while the tax, the IRS and the tax agencies can go back, the statute is, I think, 6 or 7 years. Once they get a whiff of something, they're going to go forever. And so I like to keep, personally, my own tax returns forever to show either a pattern or that this is what has been done previously. Paid preparers, if you are a CPA or a bookkeeper or something, you need to keep copies for at least 3 years. And then remember, with this, it's not just having the filing, it's having all of the stuff that underlies it, right? Why did you take that deduction? What are the receipts that that correspond with it. What are the sources of income? Why did you make this claim for a deduction or a credit? And it allows you to, you know, validate the decisions that you made. I'll tell you why this is very important. Um, I got audited. My law firm got audited, and I was so pissed. Like, no one wants to be audited, and I'm like, you know, Amazon, Bezos, Walmart, like, how much money do these people make? And I hear that they pay, you know, nada, and I'm paying a lot of money in taxes. And why are they bothering me? Like, how much more can they take from me? And fortunately, I have good tax records. And so I sent my CPA in with them. And for everything that they asked, he had a file, and he was like, oh, yeah, marketing here. Okay, this here. You want to know about that? Do you want all, you know, 50 of those receipts? Would you like a summary? You know, like, what would you like? And at the end of it, I ended up having to pay an additional $121. That made me mad. I think that was they had to justify. I was going to fight it. My CPA told me I was insane. But at the end of an audit, because I had really good tax records, the worst that they said is they moved one of my deductions from one category to another, and that's what gave me the 121 uptick. So good tax records are very important. I'm living proof, and now I'm always sure to keep that very well. Okay, implementing a document retention policy. Look, once you've considered out the cost and benefit, right, there's a cost to maintaining records. You have physical space, you have electronic space. You have to decide what's the cost and the benefit of retaining. Then you decide which one you're going to keep for a strategic, litigation, regulatory, or other purposes. Then you decide how you're going to store them. Some of the regulations, for instance, HIPAA says that you can store documents electronically. You don't have to keep the paper copies, which is great because especially with doctors and healthcare people, we'd all have warehouses everywhere around us. We had to maintain paper. So you decide what format you're going to keep it and how you're going to do that. And you contact people like Fred and others to have a method for organizing the madness so that when you have to find it, you are able to do it. And you just haven't creatively named the file, right? How many times have you sat there and gone, what did I name that document I was working on yesterday? You need to come up with a good standardized way of saving your files, names, folders, and people who are really smart about document retention and organization can help guide you in how to set that up. On the next one, I guess that's it. I'm up for questions. Do I have any questions from people? And Fred, did I hit the notes that you were wanting me to speak about? Fred, I can't hear you.
Yes, you did. You did hit most of the notes that I had in regards to, you know, what we need to consider. So, you know, the idea of a retention policy or having those documents, again, Francine talked about, you know, having documents available to protect yourself in a litigation process. The other thing is that, you know, what if you don't have them? All right. So, and again, if Francine didn't have the proper documentation, was able to access that fairly quickly, pull it together, the time and money and cost to you in a litigation of trying to, again, and I'm just going to share my screen again. Give me a quick second. How do I go through? I got to move something here because I can't see my screen. There we go. How do I go through this and find everything I need? Like Francine said, unless I named it specifically for the type of document it is, where it's saved, what folder, my folder structures are very defined and everything else, how do I find something like what I need in this mess? The other thing is if I'm scanning all the documents together and creating one file, yeah, in this 57 pages, or it could be 100 pages, how am I going to find that one specific piece of paper that I need in this one PDF file that I have saved for HR records or for corporate records or for tax records. I scan everything and I put it there. But unless it's clearly defined, as you know, Francine and I have kind of outlined, it becomes hard. And the onus is on you. So if anybody, you know, brings any litigation or you're audited or for anything, and depending upon the states, we have so many different compliance now with this PPP program. You wait and see. There are going to be so many audits behind that in terms of how did you allocate the money, where did you use it, what did you use it for, and things of that nature, that there's going to be a lot of businesses that are going to get caught. And then the government's going to say, well, guess what? You didn't use it the right way. We want all that money back. Now, prove it. And if you don't have the right documentation in the right order, in the right places, and can provide it very quickly, then you're spending a lot of time, money, and the exposure at the end is going to kill you. So again, this is open for questions now. So if anybody has any questions, we had lost Ernie. Ernie said he had a couple of questions, but it's open. So does anybody have any questions?
I have a question.
Sure.
What's the penalty for failing to maintain documents that you should maintain?
I'll let Francine answer that one.
Fred, I wanted to give that to you. No, so there can be financial penalty. Look, it depends on the law, right, Elliot, as you're well aware. So depending on the law, there can be financial record penalties of thousands of dollars a day for not maintaining certain records for, say, employees or evidence of coverage, like even just workers' comp. I had a client come and say that the state was fining them $500 a day for not having proper documentation of workers' comp coverage, right? Fortunately, they did. We found it. We got it to them. So it can run on daily amounts, but also it could just be the enormous cost of losing a litigation where you knew that you had records, but you just simply couldn't find them. Or if only I had kept that review or that email or that text and all. And you make me think of a good point, Elliot, that I didn't say, is we get a lot of records coming in from different ways. I have a lot of clients who like to text message me, which I hate as a lawyer. I don't want that because I have a legal obligation to maintain client communications, and text messages kill me. I can't handle it. It's such a pain in the patootie to maintain those. So you need to think about how are the different ways that people are communicating with you, and if you need to maintain those if you're in a regulated industry. So Elliot, the cost can be fines from different governmental agencies, depending on the statute that you may have violated by not maintaining the records, or it can just simply be lost business, lost revenue, lost opportunity, or it can go to a bad outcome in a litigation that you could have avoided had you maintained. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you.
And I think from my experience also too, with the HR consulting work that I do, the one where employers get caught up is on the payroll records, since by and large, it's going to defer to the employee what they say. And if you can't prove that you paid somebody or that you provided proper overtime calculations, it's going to default to the individual and it's going to cost.
You're absolutely right, Gary. And one of the best practices I give my employers is I have them on the weekly timesheet or biweekly timesheet that they have employees fill out is an attestation that they sign every single time they put in their timesheet that there are no hours that they have not claimed and that everything is absolutely true that they are submitting. And we use that if later they say, oh, well, you told me that I had to work off the books, or I forgot to put that in. Now I can say, so for the last 10 pay periods, you've signed this document saying that you've submitted everything. So yeah, you're absolutely right. The payroll stuff will kill you if you don't do it right. Absolutely.
And the other point of that is, in a litigation, it's, it starts off as he said, she said. So, if that person comes up and says, well, you told me I could be paid off the books, If you don't, if I as an employee ask you that question and you don't have either some kind of a note or whatever to validate your stance on what is going on with that. Is it in your employee, handbook and things of that nature as far as addressing those kind of things? Could you be open for exposure? Again, I'm saying, and I'm bringing this litigation that, you said this or you said X. Now you have to either prove that it hasn't happened or it did happen. How do you do that? The other thing Francine just brought up, which is very interesting. A lot of the things that I showed you in this presentation was about how to manage documents, paper, or whether they're in paper or digital files, and do the retention to that. But it also applies, and it is going to be another part of our presentation, is how do we take and manage the electronic documentation? Like Francine said, if people in your organization are using text messages to communicate with clients, with employees, policies and procedures, those are corporate records. I mean, just like we've seen in the political climate, is Donald Trump's personal Twitter account an official White House account? Is it, official White House policy, what he says and things of that nature? So those questions come up. And as an employer, if you use text, you use email, those are also areas where you gotchas as far as, whether it's going to prove your case or not prove your case. The other aspect, and I'm working with another organization, a managed network service. As I said, I have information in Salesforce. I have information in Constant Contact, in Outlook, in QuickBooks, in files, on databases, everything. So retention not only applies to the physical document, it also applies to the data, because data can also prove somebody's case. So when I'm getting rid of these paper files, am I purging all my network files? Am I purging my application files? Am I purging my backup files? All right. If I have a backup that goes 15 years back, sitting on some hard drive on a computer in a closet, and I'm served with discovery, guess what? Every box, every hard drive, every computer is susceptible to that discovery. And if those documents reside, then you could be in trouble. There was, when I first got in this business, in regards to document management, the trainer gave an example of one particular case. In a file cabinet or in a box somewhere, there was a memo. It was like 15 years old. But during discovery, the plaintiff found it. And because that document was in existence, it cost them $2 million for a document that they could have had, they should have destroyed years and years ago. So,
I'm sorry, Fred, I thought you were finished. Go ahead. A word of warning. If you get served a notice of a claim, right, that someone's, intending to file a lawsuit against you or has filed a lawsuit, that is not the time to begin cleaning up your records. Oh. And so I just want to share that, that's not when you go, oh, is there any 15-year-old document I need to shred right now? That'll get you in a lot of trouble. The time to destroy documents is before the claim is made. And that's why having a good document destruction policy where you get rid of things on a timely basis, and it's just part and parcel of your procedure, is very, very important. So just a quick note, don't destroy documents once legal action has commenced or is even threatened. Call a lawyer and talk to them, because we have to put out what's called a litigation hold notice. We have to tell people, everyone now stay still. You have to maintain everything as it existed at the moment that this claim was asserted.
And just to Francine's point, so if that claim or the intent of that is happening, you also have to go back. So like with the document management application, remember that retention part of policy is automatic. On the maturity date of that, it's generating a report and destroying documentation. At that point, somebody has to have the ability to go in and pause that process to say, okay, don't automatically do all of this stuff until things can be figured out.
Absolutely. And one thing that we didn't hit on is or that I didn't hit on, Fred, you did, is really the importance of getting rid of documents timely. For example, I have employers who have security cameras in their stores, right, to watch, to maintain that nothing untoward happened with the cash register, etc. We keep it for a very short period of time, and then we either override it or we destroy it. Why? I don't want someone later coming and saying, Billy Bob sexually harassed me while I was in the store, and do you have tapes? And now they look at all of my security footage and they look at all the things that happen in the course. I don't want that. I want to have a very short, tight time period where people can see stuff like that. So think about things that could potentially open doorways to other bad things, right? Like I said, if there's a camera in your store, you might want to consider having it only be on the cash register box, right? Like very tight focus. So you don't inadvertently capture bad actions that you don't want to capture and have to act upon. So it's really an interesting, you think document retention is dry or boring or, just like, but it's actually vital, and it's all about legal risk and analysis. And when you start thinking about all the things that it could expose you to, it becomes a really interesting topic to discuss.
Yeah. Once, you start thinking about it and looking at what's involved in it, just thinking about, okay, applying a retention policy 5 years after X or whatever. I mean, the first thing most people do is like, okay, I have all these external hard drives or old hard drives that I'm saving because I'm a pack rat, and I got boxes of documents in my closet or in the basement and things of that nature. Well, I saved everything because, I want to save everything, but I have everything. Now, is that a good policy? It may be in your mind because you can say you have it, but is it the right thing to do? No. And then the other side of the coin is like, well, I keep it for 5 years and I destroy everything. Well, that's the total opposite, because there's things in there that may need to be alive, like business corporate minutes and things of that nature. They are perpetual. They can't be destroyed. Yeah, even if the business goes away, they still have to exist, because the business may go away. You may sell it to somebody else, but if somebody brings a litigation based on the time period that you were there or you had that business, you're still responsible. So there's a lot of different things that need to be considered. So if you're thinking about, like just looking at it and want to see, all right, what do I really need to do? What do I need to pay attention to? And as a small business, unfortunately, we are the chef, the cook, the bottle washer. We do it all. So as Francine said, it's hard to think about all the things. I got into business because I had a great idea. I wanted to provide a good service. I wanted to do something. But as we see, whether anything in the world, business is regulated because, not because of a hindrance of what you want to do. We're regulated because of all the bad actors before us. Period. The only reason why there's compliance standards, the only reason why there's regulations that determine what we need to do as a business, is because a prior bad actor did something stupid. So we need to just be a little bit aware. And if you have any questions and you want to further look into this or ask anything of Francine or myself, fine, we'll send our contact information. Again, this video is going to be posted on our website. Francine will be, given a copy of it, and she has it there. So you'll be able to refer back to this and go through it. But, it's climbing on 9 o'clock. I don't want to really extend this too much longer. So if there are any last questions before we fold up tents for the day, also, we will have a second or another version of this, which will discuss the data portion of it. you know, like the emails and text messages, applications, and having the retention policies not only apply to your paper documents, but also apply to your data. So that is to come up. Also, the LISB annual open house is next week. So if you haven't registered for it, it's going to be a great event. Well, every year we have it, and it's been attended greatly. You know, we generally have anywhere between 50 and 100 people come to that event. It's going to be exciting. We're going to talk about a lot of things. It's a great networking event as well. So we hope to see you there as well. All right. So that's December 9th. You can go on our website and register. It's free and open. So hope to see you there. All right. So if there are no more questions, we're going to end this. And I wish everybody to have a great and successful day.
You too. So how many years is this held for?
I'm sorry?
How long is this event held for?
This one in perpetuity, Jerry. Come on. This is a classic.
I had that.
I just want to say, feel free to email me, Francine at lovelawfirmpllc.com. I'm happy to send you a sample DPR for smaller businesses. And then also, I'm happy to extend a courtesy discount to members here who, if you come, say Fred sent me, you get a 10% off of any of my flat rate packages, 15% off of any of my hourly rate. Happy to extend that courtesy to members of the LISB and supporters of Fred and what he does. So thank you for this opportunity, Fred. It's always a pleasure getting to work with you, and it's nice to meet everyone here.
Thank you. Same to you. Good information. All right. Any final questions before I hit the end button?
Thanks, Francine.
All right. Everybody have a great day. Be prosperous and be safe.
Take care.
Take
Be
care,
well.
everybody. Have a good week.